This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need, have coverage options to protect the things you value most, file a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Looky here, an old-timey newspaper writer. They still make those, a dinosaur from the golden age of newspapers when a man could win a Pulitzer Prize for being funny. He's a New York Times best-selling author. He's a colleague of mine for decades. He is Dave Barry. He's a novelist whose last novel, I will tell you, I will give you one of the greatest compliments I think I can give.
You actually read it.
Made me feel like I was reading Carl Hiaasen.
Oh, well, that is. I'll take that.
Right?
I'll take that compliment.
But you would say that Swamp Story, and I want to talk to you about your career. I want to talk to you about your life because I find you, beyond the laughter, to be uncommonly wise about what matters in life.
Well, that's not accurate, but okay.
That love is what matters. You in seeking marital bliss, were a bit of a mentor to me on what could be possible.
Well, I told you to get married, but that's because I'm married to a Cuban Jewish woman who could not stand the idea that you were walking around not being married. Huh? And I'm a guy, and I'm thinking, well, he's dating a lot of very attractive women. Why should he get married? That was my feeling. But I would not say that.
Right? No, you.
But Michelle was pretty much determined that you should marry somebody, preferably like immediately.
Yes.
Because I remember once, and I hope your current wife, who's a beautiful woman, is not listening to this right now or ever. But we went out to dinner with you. You may not remember this. My wife Michelle and I went out with the woman you were dating at the time.
I do remember
who
this.
Was like
we were in
Miss Venezuela.
We were in Miami Beach, and it was. I remember several lovely evenings with you having too much to drink. One at Marlin Spring Training, and this evening that you're talking about.
Right, and Michelle was like hectoring you to marry this woman immediately, and the woman was like all for it. I think Miss whatever she was. She was a very attractive. Not as attractive as your current wife, but very attractive.
Wait, please stop doing this.
But you resisted. I was impressed. I would have eventually just given up and said, okay, let's go get married right now here at the restaurant.
Okay, but aspirationally, I will tell people that your marriage was aspirational.
Oh, you wanted to marry my wife?
The happiness that you two had, the camaraderie that you two had, the friendship that you two had, the understanding and acceptance that you two have, the laughter that you two have, you seemed, from where I was standing, to have found bliss after someone who had written about his previous marriage in print, and it seemed like the reader felt totally betrayed by your first marriage not succeeding. Somehow you had done something wrong when all I saw you do was choose bliss.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That is a nice way of putting it. You're right. I did get a lot of grief because, when you write a humor column, or any kind of column, you wrote a column for years, people think they know you, and they really don't know you. They know what you present to them. In my case, the wacky, funny, hilarious guy. And I had written for years about, my family, my son, and everything. And then when I got a divorce, and I won't go into why, but there were, it was 110% my responsibility, my fault. I got a lot. People were really not happy with me. And to this day, there are people who...
but they feel... Let's talk about the connection a newspaper writer makes through laughter, because the audience somehow felt let down by you. But I was watching... I don't know you at this point. I just know what you're getting into and how much happier it seems to make you. So none of that is important to me. I just see a colleague who seems to be really happy with a friend of mine who also seems to be really happy. Why wouldn't I celebrate that for them?
But then you waited a long time before you personally got married, I have to say.
I did.
Yeah.
I didn't believe in the institution. I'm telling you, I'm not kidding when I say I have seen precious few marriages that I look at and say there's a level of depth there of love that could survive just about any test to its strength.
Yeah. Yeah, I thank you. That is true. We have a wonderful marriage. We still have a wonderful marriage, but it was like that was a good test right from the start. Like, wow, so many people think I'm an idiot for this and hate me for this. I must really be in love with this person to do this, which turned out to be true. So yeah, thank you. And I'm glad I inspired you. Glad you got married.
Well, I want to talk to you
Thank you
more.
for inviting me to your wedding. It was a star-studded affair. Sometime we should talk about that.
I want to talk about.
I explained to Pat Riley what I think he's doing right, what I think he's doing wrong, and he had to listen to me because we were at a wedding. What he's going to do, right?
I'm sure he was pretty annoyed by all of the guests like you that were doing the same thing that you were doing. Yeah. Your learning around love and the things that are important. Can you share with the audience some of the teachers that you have had on love?
Oh, well, this is going to sound obvious and corny, but my parents, both my parents had issues, problems. My dad was an alcoholic. We recovered and he was a great guy always. He was always a man of the community, a helper of people. He was a Presbyterian minister who ran an inner city organization in New York City and was active in the civil rights movement. So he was this good guy, good man. Everybody loved him. Dave Barry was like the guy you called when your kids were in trouble and that he wanted your marriage was what they called my dad, and my dad would always be there for them. And then when I was in my late teens, early 20s, became an alcoholic. He would always had liked to drink, and it took over. And he kind of bottomed out, got into AA, and spent the rest of his life, the last 20, 25 years of his life sober, and again, helping people more through AA than what he had done before. So that was my dad. My mom, this is going to sound like I have the world's worst, was a really, really wonderfully funny person who suffered from depression. And ultimately, after my dad died, committed suicide. She could not stand life without him. And boy, I don't know how we got here so fast to this, this tragic.
It happens around here. There used to be tissues around here. We did get here awfully fast.
But anyway, my point is, if you just looked at that, my upbringing, and said, well, his dad was an alcoholic and his mom committed suicide. It must have been a horrible. But it wasn't. I had a great childhood. They were wonderful. They were funny people. Everything I know about humor, I learned from them, especially from my mom, who was like this really dark person, but she'd use her humor. She was just funny. And they loved each other. I mean, they really, really loved each other. In fact, that was kind of why my mom didn't keep going after my dad died. But that was I think, my template for, love is like it isn't about like when things are great. It isn't about just the initial attraction and which everybody experiences, but the fact that through really rough times, the only thing that really in the end counted for each of them was the other one of them. And so that's like a strong role. But then isn't that most people's parents? No. Okay, give me this look.
Well, and I don't want to just dismiss him as just an alcoholic, but if I give you just the bare bones of someone who committed suicide and ran depressant and another person who had alcohol, I could just say, without judgment, people are flawed, people have weaknesses, they did the best that they could. But no, the way that you frame that, a lot of people could do a quick snapshot and say, oh, his funny comes from pain, but not necessarily, right?
Yeah, and I've heard that a lot through the years. When people find out my backstory, they go, well, he's the clown who's hiding his tears. But the truth is, the truth is, I was happy. I was a happy kid. I never when my things went wrong for my parents, I was kind of out of the house.
You always gave off happy as an adult, though. I think that's part of why maybe even your newspaper readers felt somehow like, what do you mean his marriage isn't totally 100% happy? Like you, in my experience, you always gave off happy. It was nice to be around you.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, first of all, look at what my job was. I was getting paid pretty good money for a newspaper person to just do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, anywhere. with whatever expense.
But grateful, though, all the time.
Yeah,
Not
no,
everyone's grateful. Like what I've told you this before, but what I marveled about you was you were this amazing giant in the industry, and it seemed to come without ego. It was always with humility.
Again, I'll credit my parents. They're both from the Midwest, and that like nobody in our family was ever allowed to brag. I mean, what we did in our family was we made fun of that. You're never too big to say thank you to whoever, whatever person is waiting on you in a store. You're never too big, you're never gonna be more important than the people around you. That was a fundamental value in my family. So like, I would have felt stupid when I achieved success as a newspaper person, if I had pretended that I achieved it because I was some kind of superior human being, instead of basically a guy who was good at making people laugh. Which is it's a nice skill, talent, whatever to have, but it isn't like it's not curing cancer,
I mean, you were as surprised to win the Pulitzer Prize as anyone.
Whoa,
right?
yeah, I did not expect to win the Pulitzer Prize. And that is not false modesty, because it's distinguished commentary is the look up distinguished in the it's not what I was writing. I was writing about people discovering snakes in their toilet. That was
you were writing about Florida. You were writing about just funny things that were everything provided funny for you. I've told people before, writing funny is the hardest thing. It's the hardest kind of writing. And we've talked before about it's not exactly easy for you. You will spend a day on a joke.
Oh yeah, writing. The trick with humor is it's like magic, when the guy pulls the coin out of your ear and it looks like he really pulled the coin out of your ear, you don't see that the guy spent 16 hours practicing that one particular movement with his finger. Writing humor is the same way. It's supposed to look like it was just coming out of you, but it doesn't just come out of you. You got to when you read somebody who thinks they're funny. And I've read a lot of people who think they're funny, but they're not really putting the time, they're putting the effort. It's really obvious with humor more than any other kind of writing. So yeah, I'm going to agree with you that even though that's what I did, writing humor is hard.
When did you realize that you were good at it? Like when did you stop having doubt?
Well, I thought I was funny a lot sooner than the rest of the world did. But
because you were a class clown, right?
I was literally elected class clown, Pleasantville High School, class of 1965, and I'm darn proud of that. Dan.
Is it just because your mom was funny? Like there wasn't any deflection going on there? You weren't trying to avoid intimacy? Your mom was just dark humor funny, and so you were funny?
Well, also I was a little puberty impaired guy, and what I really wanted to do was be like a football star or something, and like have girls really be interested in me just because but I wasn't any of that. What I could do was make people laugh. I was good at that. So that's what it definitely was insecurity that made me want to entertain people. It probably still is. I mean, I think most people who do humor for a living are usually they're insecure. And the other thing is we're kind of deflectors. We don't want people to know too much about us because then they won't like us. So what we do is make them like us by making them laugh, which is kind of a good way to keep people friendly with you, but not let them get too close.
Excellent way to avoid intimacy.
Yes.
I do it with questions. It's not even that. It's just asking people about themselves.
I know. I notice that anytime I say anything about your personal life, you immediately turn it back to me.
Well, you made it about Miss Venezuela. Like, I don't need that in my life. Let's knock it off. Like,
if you're listening, it wasn't you. It was Nan. Miss Venezuela. Was it Miss Venezuela?
No, can we move on, please? Thank you. I do appreciate you burrowing in there. Maybe we'll get back to it later.
Did she have like a sash on that night?
Only a sash. It was such a wild night. When you say that insecurities in childhood, what were they?
I couldn't. I wasn't good at sports. And that was what you wanted. I mean, I played Little League because that's what you did. And
a way to be popular.
Yeah,
easy access shortcut to however it is you get to popular. Sports is easier than laughter.
Yeah, and I wasn't like one of the boys that the girls all just seemed looking at him and said, "Boy, he's cute."
Right.
I wasn't that guy. So. And like I said, I didn't reach puberty until I was in my early 30s, and I was this really a late bloomer.
You were a child.
Yeah, I still have no hair on my arms. Look at my arms.
You still look.
I'm
people
hairless.
would not believe your age.
I'm a hairless.
You've always looked at the entire time I've known you. You've looked young for your age.
Well, yeah, but I'm now really old.
How old are you right now?
I'm 77 years old.
Nobody would believe that.
Well,
looking
but
at
it's
this.
true. And you ask me anything about what happened in 1953, and I was there, man. But anyway, the point is, I wasn't like good at anything except being funny. So that really was a logical thing for me to do, and I always did it, and I kept on doing it. And I got told many times that you can't be just funny for the rest of your life, but whoever said that's wrong. It's like, because I've never turned the corner into maturity.
Who is the teacher that you have to most show?
Exactly.
You know what? You were really wrong about this.
Yeah.
I was able to.
I want to go. I really want to go back. Mrs. Bassage. I want to go find her. She's dead a long time, but I'd dig her up just to tell her. Oh, you can't joke your way through life, huh, Mrs. Bassage?
You just yelling.
Take a look.
You're just yelling at her.
Want to
corpse.
see my house, Mrs. Bassage? Nicer than your house. Yeah.
You're just gonna physically dig her up to scream at her face.
Yeah. I'm kind of hoping they didn't cremate her, because then there'll be an action. Because she was pretty skeletal when she was alive, and I don't think she would look all that different as a dead person.
Do you look back at the time when you're talking about, because I don't know what age this was, that your mother kills herself, and you're making it the romantic story of, well, she loved my father so much.
Oh no! But the time, okay, I'll
a
tell
terrible segue by me, admittedly, while we're
Let's
laughing.
go right from Mrs. Bassage.
An admittedly terrible segue by me, but I've been stuck there since you said it, because you just sort of skipped past it as if like, oh, there's no trauma there, and I'm like, well, wait a minute.
No, it was traumatic, but I was like in my 40s. I had become a successful humor columnist at this point. My dad died, and my mom just was not dealing with it well. And we went through this phase, and like, if you have older parents, and then a lot of people can know what this phase is, where the dynamic starts to shift from they're your parent to like you're both neutral, sort of. Then you become sort of there. So my mom had this house in Armonk, New York, that my dad built with his hands, and that I grew up in. And she, we all told her, you can't keep the house because it's in the middle of the woods, and it's too big, and you need to sell your house and move on with your life. And so she sold the house, and then she didn't know where to go. And she would come to Florida to live with me for a while. Then she would go out to California, where both my brothers lived, and live with one, live with the, just couldn't. And so like, I vividly remember the last time I saw her. She called me up and said she wanted to go to Connecticut and look at this community in Connecticut that some friends of hers had lived in. And then, so I said, okay, your mom's your mom. So I fly up and meet her in Hartford, Connecticut, rent a car. We drive to this place, and all the way there, I'm like, she's telling me, stuff about she misses dad, and I'm like, Mom, you gotta look ahead. You gotta, you still have friends, you have money because you sold the house, and and she's like sad, and I'm like pushing her, like, Mom, you gotta do that. You gotta do, like, I know what she's going through, right? So we finally we get to, I think it was Essex, Connecticut or whatever, and immediately I can see, that she doesn't want to be there. That's not really where she went. What she wants to be is like a couple of years ago, earlier, back in Armonk with my dad, which will never happen. He's gone. But I'm like, Mom, you gotta. And so like the next morning, we have this really tense breakfast in the motel, and I'm like, Mom, you have to make a decision. This is ridiculous. You can't keep moving from, the brother to brother. You can stay with us if you want, but you got to pick what you want to do. You got to do, because I know now, I'm 40 and I'm a successful, columnist, and you don't know what you're doing. Anyway, and I bought her a map. Like, I'll never forgive myself for this. A map of the United States. Like, pick a place. I'll take you there. We'll figure it out. Okay. And so she hugs me goodbye. Put her on the plane. She's going back out to one of my brothers in Sunnyvale, California, which she also hates, to try to figure out what she wants to do next. And then a couple weeks later, my brothers and I all got birthday cards from her. Happy birthday, I love you. And it wasn't our birthdays, but she's just, telling us she loved us. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call. It's from my brother. My mom's in the hospital. She's taken an overdose of Valium and vodka, and she's on life support, and her brain has ceased functioning. And do they have permission to unplug my mom? So the lesson, which is still, stings me, is don't ever think you know what your parents are going through, or don't ever think you know what anybody's going through. Especially don't think you know what an older person is going through at the end of life. And I, the last thing I did is bought her a fucking map. Just so I can't remember what question you asked me. But that was just that was the low point for me of being her son. Now, since that time, I've made, I understood she wasn't blaming me, and I wasn't the cause of why she committed suicide at all. But I will forever blame me for not at least being a little more aware of what was going on.
I'm deeply sorry about all of that. I want to ask you some questions about how you go about forgiving yourself, but I will tell you this about my own father, because you know him, you know some of the family, and with your wife, the Cuban Jew, you also know some of my family dynamics. My father, when he was going through whatever it is he's gone through twice now, where he has some sort of short-circuiting that has to do with losing his identity or his job, I was minutes away from, and I've told this story on our show before, but I was minutes away from going to pick him up to take him to a psychiatrist because he was acting in ways the family didn't recognize. And as I was headed to go pick him up, my mother calls me from the hospital. Firefighters have come and gotten him off a balcony. He doesn't remember how it is. He's, 76, 77, 78 years old. He's hanging from a balcony. And so I came very close to pulling up on my father on a sidewalk minutes too late to get him the help that he needed. And that could have been where I started re-examining all the things, like a map that I had given him incorrectly while trying to reach him a number of different ways. How do you forgive yourself?
I never really have. I mean, if I'm being honest, I can right now. I mean, the guilt I'm feeling, I can just summon it up in a second. The only thing is, I knew her really well, knew my mom really well, and my mom was not a judgmental person. I mean, she judged herself harshly, but she never judged anybody else. And somehow she would have seen humor in what I did.
But at that point, the reason I'm finding forgiveness from over here is just at that point, what knowledge can you really have of what it is to love so deeply that grief would be a loss that you cannot replace? Like you hadn't lost.
I haven't
like
experienced
that.
anything like that, and I still haven't. I don't know. I don't. Like I say, I have not really ever totally resolved in my mind what my behavior toward my mom then, except I know she didn't judge me. She would have never judged me for that. She would have viewed it as totally her own fault that she was lost, didn't know where she wanted to go. She wouldn't blame anybody but herself for that.
But you would recognize that. How long have you now been married to Michelle?
31 years, 30. Yeah.
How long were your parents together?
Longer than that.
The thing that my brother's death taught me, among many, is that when I now look into the eyes of my wife, who represents the greatest love I've known that wasn't my brother, I now have the understanding that whatever loss is there, either she loses me or I lose her, is going to be the most unimaginable pain that I am risking, and that is what the deepest of love is.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what love is. This is also something, and everybody with kids has the same issue. Something like you're hostage now to this relationship that will never ever go away. You can't erase it. And in the end, nobody, as the old saying, nobody gets out of here alive. So sooner or later, any love you have, any kind of love you have, is going to result in unimaginable pain to either you or the person you love. How did we get to this level of conversation?
We will get to the funny stuff in a second. I have not had this conversation
also, just
with
so you know, my
before.
dog is dying, Dan.
The original question was, what did you ask Pat Riley at my wedding? you and
I did tell Pat, and I will tell you right now what I told him, and you judge whether you think it's right. I pointed out to him, I've been watching sports a long time. I know he's a big deal. He's Pat Riley. I've been watching basketball a long time. The team that scores the most points wins the game every single time, Dan.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I told Pat.
He took it away from my wedding. It was the thing. It was the nugget that he
But
took away.
has he employed? No,
Yeah,
Pat. I know he's listening.
He came with a gift to my wedding.
Outscored
and
the opponent, Pat.
He left with that gift, thanks to you. Another thing that you taught me that I saw with great intensity just watching you is because you had Sophie, your daughter, later in life, the amount of intensity that you and Michelle brought to the love of her was something awe-inspiring to behold.
Thank you. So I'm going to write down another.
That's right.
another
deep. And I want, but the reason, listen, Dave, we'll get to the funny in a second, but I want people to know in this setting some people that I have learned from and what they've learned, because I'm not kidding you when I tell you, beyond being an inspiration in a lot of ways, you've lived a life that from over here seems to have things in it that are the nutrients everyone can gain something from.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's not. I really didn't invent any of these things, but yeah, Sophie, she's an incredible gift. But we went through the worst thing that ever happened. This is what I was just talking about, hostage. When you're a kid, you become a hostage. The worst thing that ever happened to me involved Sophie. Which was when she had just turned 18, and she was going to go to Duke. She'd been accepted at Duke, where she wanted to go. And the day or 2 days before, on August 18th, 2018, she's getting ready to go to Duke, and she wakes up and she can't move. Can't move her from her chest down. She cannot move. And at first we're like, this is okay, some kind of nervous panic. It's not like her, but maybe that's what it is. Pretty quickly think, no, it's something else. And so we take her into the hospital, and neurologists, thank God, diagnosed immediately what it was. And it's something called transverse myelitis. And so our daughter's in there getting scanned, and she comes out, this neurologist, and sits down with me and Michelle and says, it's not good. That's the first thing she said. She said, I'm pretty sure this is called transverse myelitis, and it's when your immune system attacks your spinal cord. And a third of the time, people recover completely. And a third of the time, they only partly recover. And a third of the time, they never recover at all, never walk again. This is what we're being told as our daughter is in the other room 2 days from going to Duke. And so just to get quickly through to the good part, she did recover. It took a couple of months, an intense therapy and everything. And she recovered and got to Duke a semester late. They wanted to make her a year late, but she said, no, I'm class of 2022 and I want to be. She graduated with honors and is now fine. But we went through the absolute most unimaginably horrible time. I mean, no, that's not true. People have lost their children, which is obviously worse. But at the time, I could not imagine anything worse. I remember the next day, Michelle never left the hospital. She stayed in the hospital 45 straight days with Sophie until Sophie was able to come home. The next day, I would go home every night to walk the dog and bring clothes in to Michelle and Sophie. I remember the next morning, I'm driving to the hospital, the Baptist hospital, and drove by Sophie's elementary school. And there were little kids. We're walking across the street, just where Sophie used to walk across the street. I'm thinking, my daughter's never going to walk again. This is it. And I had to pull off the road. I was just sobbing. And every night when I would leave the hospital, I would just first thing to get in the car and just cry for half an hour. I'm crying now. And so I guess the result of it was that, first of all, I decided she was the most amazing human being on the face of the earth. She never complained. She never said, why me? She, to this day, never says, oh, I'm a victim of transverse myelitis. She has become a person who counsels other people who have but you would never hear her bring it up, ever. I'm bringing it up because it changed my life. But the lesson of that was going right back to what you were talking about, the amount of love you feel, the feeling that the three of us had, Michelle, Sophie, and me, in that hospital room day after day, where there's all these tubes in and out of her, and doctors come in all the time, and can she move yet? It was like 11 days before she even moved a toe, like during which we thought, this is it. When is she? And every day they'd come in and say, has she moved? Nope, nothing. And they'd come and say, Sophie, can you feel anything? Nope, nothing. Day after day of that. When it finally came through, what we all three came away from, and Michelle and I talk about this like almost every day, is that if you think that you have trouble in your life, you probably don't. Like the things that we go around worrying about, and the things people get upset about, they don't matter. Did you get up this morning? Can you walk around? Do you have, the people you love still around? Are they alive? That's all that matters. It doesn't matter if your roof is leaking and your car is messed up. It doesn't matter who got elected president of the United States, whether you like them or you don't like them. That does not matter. What really matters is the things absolutely closest to you, your kids, your loved ones, and are they okay? Are you okay with them? That's all that matters.
When you say it changed your life, is it because you now live yourself since that hospital room?
Absolutely. Every single day when something bad happens that I think is something bad, I think about Sophie and lying there, and she couldn't move. And that's, that looked like, for a while, that looked like that was it. She'll never get to Duke and she'll never walk again. And because there are plenty of people who were in the same situation and didn't get out of it. So every single day that anything remotely bad happens to me, I think about that. Immediately goes to there. I go to there.
You were not like that before that hospital experience, because you carried yourself as somebody who had some wisdoms about how to be happy in life.
Okay, well, I was never like an idiot about anything that bothers me is the worst thing in the world. I mean, we all know people like that, and I was never that. But I could be upset for days about pretty minor things before. It takes an incredible amount to get me upset about anything for more than 10 minutes now, because of my mind goes right back to that. And so that did change me. That changed me more than anything else that ever happened to me.
The big game happened, football's done, and man, what a time football was. I enjoyed every football week this season, opening up a Miller Lite, that sound of the can opening, the cheers with my dad. It's football and Miller Lite. Nothing says football like the great taste of Miller Lite. Great tasting light beer for people who love beer. It's always the perfect time for friends, family, and a great tasting light beer. Tastes like Miller time. Miller Lite is brewed for taste. It hits different than other light beers. It's a taste you can depend on, folks. No games, no gimmicks, just a great beer for people who like beer. Simple ingredients, malted barley for rich, balanced toffee note flavors, that iconic golden color, the original light beer since 1975, and still the best one. Miller Lite, great taste, 96 calories. Go to MillerLite.com/beach to find delivery options near you, or you can pick up some Miller Lite pretty much anywhere they sell beer. Tastes like Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces.
When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Mattel, Heinz, or Skims, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the business behind the business, making and selling, and for shoppers, buying. Simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. No one does selling better than Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling, on the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Heinz uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Batard, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Batard to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Batard.
One of the reasons that I say that your happiness seemed to be aspirational, at least as that love ran through Sophie, is because all the time I was overwhelmed at how proud both of you were about talking about this isn't the normal parent stuff of our kid is the best. Our kid really is the best.
She really is, though. I'm going to just say it. She is the best. My other kid is 2. I have a son, Robin. He's an incredible kid, too. So.
He really gets the short end of the stick.
No,
you wrote about him. He got the different. He got the
I
Dave
picked him
Barry.
up in the Wienermobile at school. So that was
yes. He got celebrity journalist Dave Barry as the father.
Well, he told me he went back to his school for the reunion last spring. And he said the thing that most people still remember was that I picked him up in the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. So that was a gift, and not many fathers can give their children that.
No, it's great when when the father gives the child the gift of your
embarrassment.
father. Yes, your father being funny.
The gift of humiliation.
Here's your father not caring at all about you and your experience, but your father gets the applause of being funny around his son.
Hey, that's what put him through school.
Firstborn, second favorites.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
the way that we're. Well, I mean, but you have more appreciation in your 50s for the honor and responsibility of being a parent in a loving household that doesn't have conflict between the parents.
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in having kids later in life because of that. Yeah, because you get more. You appreciate it more, and you have more. I think you have more time for them, but
you're less selfish.
I think so, and you also usually have more resources. The other view of it is if you have your kids early, then you can start partying in your 50s.
Right, so you can get your life back.
You can move to the villages and get a really cool golf cart and
Dave,
drive around drunk.
I don't think that the audience necessarily knows how intimate, rare, and antiquated the funny local columnist's relationship with his community is. You make me laugh in print. I will love you forever because you're someone who makes me, for those moments, the medicine of laughter. I like reading that guy. Can you articulate it, as someone who's lived it, what it's like to be in this area for 50 years, a voice that reaches people with laughter, and what that connection is when you meet the people, when you walk in today and everyone's saying, do you know what a legend this person is?
Well, that would just make me feel old here. Yes. Everybody here is 19 years old.
That's right.
But no,
they don't even know what newspapers are, Dave.
Yeah, I used to have this thing that would happen to me when I was like, there's fame and then there's newspaper fame, which is kind of like, somewhere below the local TV weather guy. Like, it's not everybody reading the news. But I used to, I'll never forget, like I said, Nordstrom, I think. I'm in Nordstrom trying to buy socks, I think. And the salesman just turns out to be a huge fan of my column. He's like, oh, God, you're Dave Barry. Like, oh, man. And this random woman is standing nearby. And he's like, do you know who this is? And she goes, no. And he goes, Dave Barry. And she goes, clearly knows. I have no, okay. And he goes, well, Dave, tell her. Tell her.
Yes.
Like,
tell her who you
so
are.
what am I supposed to tell her? I'm really hilarious. Like, I can't think of anything funny right now. But I'm trying to buy some socks. But
yes.
Anyway, that's kind of what it's like. No, but
that is not the connection between you and the reader.
I had a wonderful relationship with my readers. I always did. I relied on my readers for a lot of source material. They would send me, if something would happen, like, okay, Miami being Miami. I don't know if you remember this, but I got a call from a reader once saying, I'm on the People Mover. For those of you who don't live in Miami, the People Mover is this train that moves around downtown Miami, moves people. And he goes, I'm on the People Mover, and there's a shark on the People Mover. And I go, what? He goes, yeah, and it's not dead, Dave. It's
they call you with these kinds of tips all over Miami.
So
yes.
I'm on that story. I'm on that
yes,
story right
yes.
away. That's
You're doing real journalism.
That is what I'm born to do, man.
That's
right. My kind of. And it turns out there was a shark on these two. I don't know if you remember this.
Yes, I do. Yes, there was a live shark on the People Mover.
What happened? Just to understand, it didn't get on by itself. Okay, let's not give the shark that much credit. But these two homeless guys catch a shark in Biscayne Bay. Like a nurse shark, like 6 feet long. And they decide this is a chance to make some money. They're going to sell it to a restaurant. Now, why they think a restaurant is going to want A shark, I don't know.
A live shark.
A live shark. They don't have a car. They're two homeless guys, but they get on and the people mover, which I think was free at the time. And it's not designed for marine life. That's why we call it the people mover.
That's correct.
But it was rush hour, and there are people like on there with this thing, and they go over to the river where there's a bunch of restaurants on the river, and nobody wants to buy their shark.
Predictably.
So who knew? So then they leave it on the streets of Miami, and then the Herald. It was the front page of the Herald the next day because people would come to work the next day, and there's
why is there
a shark in downtown Miami?
That's right.
At that point, it was dead. They don't go that long.
That's right.
I mean, they're hardy animals, Dan,
right, but not that long. Yes.
Overnight, no.
Yes.
But there was a quote from a shopkeeper. This is so Miami. It's like, yeah, like when I first saw it, I thought, oh, damn, it's a dead body because and it's always really relieved it was just a shark.
Again, this does not speak to your relationship with your
No,
readers
it's
at
true.
all, except that they call you.
They call me
and
up.
they probably call you because they think they have your sense of humor,
Yeah,
which
no,
is why they think they know you.
They do, and they all think they know me, and they think that I'm just wild and wacky all the time, which I'm not. But yeah, that's like to this day, if somebody will recognize me in Publix, I'm like maybe in the supermarket aisle, and they'll try and decide which size granola to get, and they'll say. The people who recognize me, well, you going to write a column about this, Dave? And I'm like, well,
that's not very.
No,
funny.
I'm buying granola, but people do feel they know you. I'm sure it was the same with you when you wrote a column. Of course, in your case, they thought they knew you and they hated you.
Correct. That is.
They thought you were very arrogant.
Well,
how would anybody get that impression?
Yes, the opinionated, strident, obnoxious, counterintuitive player apologist was popular. I had a different relationship with my readers, I would say, than you did. Your relationship with your readers feels like a real feel-good thing. It is, to me, you have aspirationally one of the best careers a journalist could ever have.
I will not argue with that. I really do think that for this period from like mid-'70s through mid-2000s, I had the best job in American journalism. I had the most freedom. I was well compensated. I was in 500 newspapers, and I could do anything I wanted. And I wanted to. If I read in that there was going to be a sommelier of the year competition at the Waldorf Astoria, I could just tell Gene Weingarten at Gene, I got to go to New York and rent a tuxedo and go to the sommelier of the year competition.
You
would never even question.
You wrote often about wasting expense account money, like that you were just doing things to fund your curiosity, laughter habit.
Yeah, I went to New York with Chuck Fadley, a photographer, and this was in 1986. We rented a helicopter for $8,000. I don't know what it costs now, but back then that was a lot of money. $8,000.
It's still a lot of money
to take a picture of a garbage barge from the air.
You told a great story, though. It ended up being worth it because you were making fun of New York because they said Miami was paradise lost, and so you showed here's New York, just a garbage ship in your waters.
That's right.
That was worth $8,000.
But can you imagine what you would have to do today to get the Miami Herald to give you $8,000 to do anything? Like it's not possible. We did it. We didn't even ask. Would it be okay for us to rent a helicopter to take a picture of garbage?
Well, but you
just
wait
said,
a minute.
We'll charge this. Do you guys take American Express?
Hold on. You had a carte blanche. I need to explain to people. It's not merely the golden age of American newspapering. This man at a place that has Tropic Magazine, which is an award-winning ancillary journalistic arm of the Miami Herald, where all the best journalism was done by the best journalists this market has ever had. You had a carte blanche that not most people had. I remember being introduced to it. You came to spring training. I was the first year covering the Marlins, and you're like, let me take you to dinner. And I thought it was because you wanted me to give you Marlins information. And all we did, we took an agent out to dinner, spent way too much money, and you ended up writing about alligators who jump up and grab bait off of a line. And you didn't end up writing about baseball at all.
Gatorland. No, I didn't. Yeah,
You just spent money, like you spilled over the bar. That seemed to me like journalistic excess too. I had never seen somebody spend like that with newspaper
No, I remember
money.
when I asked you, because I remember I was hanging around. We were hanging around the Marlins spring training, and we're talking. And I remember asking you, you want to go to dinner? And you're like, oh, okay. Now you're gonna ask me, like inside information. And you were fine with that. Like this, okay. I'm the young sports writer, and you're the star columnist. So you'll just pick my brain. But
No,
really
that's not
wasn't-
what it was.
That
No.
wasn't the goal at all. The goal was just to go have a few drinks. Speaking of tropic things that we could do I don't know how you could do them now, but when the Miami Heat became a franchise, the only other franchise in Florida was the Orlando Magic, and they were both brand new, as I recall. And we decided to start a rivalry. But when I say we, Tropic Magazine. So we ran a cover story of me spinning a basketball on my middle finger, and I wrote this just absolute vicious attack on the city,
on Orlando,
on
the
Orlando.
city of Orlando.
But this is where it was like went beyond just like a regular newspaper thing and just into performance art. We rented a bus, and we ran a competition in Tropic for people to come up with anti-Orlando slogans. We were determined to start a bitter rivalry because we figured there's only one other team we could beat in the NBA, which would be Orlando. And so we got our bus, like 40, 50 people get on the bus, who the winners of the people who had written the most vicious anti-Orlando cheers, rode up to Orlando on the bus, had to stop on the way to get more alcohol because we ran out on the way up. And we get there, and they had Pat. Remember Pat?
Pat Williams was their general manager, a deeply religious man who had about 18 adopted children and was a very kind man.
But he loved the whole idea of the rivalry.
Well, he loved your column, and he loved the fact that you were for no reason creating a rivalry with the Orlando Magic. You specifically.
Yeah. So we show up having written this vicious story, and the Orlando Sentinel columnist Bob Morris, they printed it, and they here they come with these Miami people, and they had Pat Williams had cordoned off a section for us to sit, and they had put crime scene tape around it, and then they put baking soda all around, which they claimed was cocaine.
Of course. Yes. Subtle humor.
But my point is, like, that was fun.
It was.
That was really
the glory days of moneyed newspaper thing.
We just rented a bus.
Yes, it was great.
And we rented a hotel up there.
Yes, it was great fun, and now newspapers are dead.
But you're
and-
saying that was why the newspaper went right down the toilet.
That's correct. You bankrupted newspapers with your expense
I never
account.
thought of it that way.
They of course they don't spend money that way anymore. Why would they spend money that way anymore?
Wow, it was so much fun.
You must be mortified by the state of American newspapers. Like for as much as you are a humor columnist, you saw the Miami Herald be an inspiration to the nation's journalists on how to tell truth to power, how to stamp out corruption, and now there's just an infestation of it in South Florida that can't be stopped because there are no governors.
But it's not just here; it's everywhere. It's really sad what's happened to newspapers. I always say it's really bad to be in an industry run by English majors, but that's kind of what happened to us. Well, the internet, what internet? That we didn't really catch that wave, is what I'm saying. And we ended up being destroyed by it. But it's everywhere. I mean, there's no local journalism left. There's big papers like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, but there's very few successful local papers. They're just all struggling. They're all out of money.
There can't be a new Dave Barry, correct?
No, I agree. I think there are a lot of funny people, but they're writing Substacks, and they're writing Twitter, and they're writing for TV shows. But there's no. Yeah, I was pretty much the end of that line. And I was lucky enough to get to know like Art Buchwald and Russell Baker and Irma Bombeck, the kind of generation ahead of me. When it was, every newspaper wanted to have a humor columnist, and there were a million local humor columnists. And I was one of the more successful of those.
No, you were the most
I
successful.
was for a while.
Tony Kornheiser told me one time, we did at the Atlanta Olympics, I think you and I both wrote columns doing rhythmic or synchronized swimming with the U.S. Women's Olympic team.
And I'm just going to say, this is gonna sound like I'm blowing smoke up your ass, but you wrote a funnier column than I did.
I don't
about
believe that. I don't
But just so
believe
the listeners know what we're talking about, Dan and I were covering the Olympics in 1996 in Atlanta, the bomb Olympics, and I think it was my idea, but you agreed to go along.
Tony Kornheiser told me, don't do that. You don't want to be writing comedy opposite Dave Barry. That's Tony Kornheiser. Like if he wasn't the second best humor columnist in America, he was pretty close.
Yeah, he was wrong. You wrote a really funny column, but we went to the Emory University pool and both almost drowned trying to stay up with, I don't know if it was the U.S. national.
Yeah, I kicked a girl in the face. It was bad. I was not good. I was not graceful in the water.
Somewhere is my favorite picture of all time of me, and it's you and me trying to keep all around us are these women like ballerinas with their hands over their heads, and there's you and I disappearing beneath the surface of the Emory University pool.
By accident, I've also got my nose pin upside down because I didn't know how to do a nose pin.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what it's called either. I don't think it's a nose pin. But Tony Kornheiser mentioned to me that you don't want to be writing opposite Dave Barry as a humor columnist. There was nobody doing it as well as you were doing.
I was
just the lane of all I do is write funny.
Yeah.
The expectation of it's always going to be funny, even though, in fact, it was so. This is one of the things I remember about your range is that when you wrote on dark, heavy stuff, as you sometimes did, and did extraordinarily well, they'd have to put your name at the end of the article instead of at the beginning because your byline meant it was going to be funny.
Okay, if you say so.
They did. I remember you wrote a couple of dark, more serious pieces.
No, when my mom committed suicide, I wrote about that. And when my son Rob was in a bike accident, I wrote about that. And people said very nice things sometimes about when I wrote serious things, like, why don't you write more serious? And I'm like, because the only times I did it was some horrible thing happened that I had to write, get it out of me. That I don't want more horrible things to happen to me. I want to go back to writing, booger jokes. So.
Who's scoring big in the NBA this season? You are, with all the new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From Monster Slams to Dishing the Rock to Cleaning the Glass, get behind your favorite players and the prop bets you can make on DraftKings, the home of NBA player props. New DraftKings customers, bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Take it to the rack with DraftKings Sportsbook. Every point counts. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BEACH. That's code BEACH for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only at DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Do you remember the first things you were paid for? I remember that I got $15 an article to cover city council meetings about sewage for the River Cities Gazette.
Yeah, paid to write?
Yeah, the first time you realized the possibility, wait a minute, I can make money doing this and think of it as a career, that you can be funny for the rest of your life.
Paid to write humor. Yeah, it was kind of not quite the same. Sure, I went to work when I got out of college for a little newspaper in Pennsylvania, in Westchester, Pennsylvania, the Daily Local News, which was tiny, by which I mean to say it's about the same circulation as the Miami Herald is today. But it was like you did everything there. You wrote a lot of obituaries and covered meetings and police and fire and stuff like that. But you could write what they called it an ad lib, an op-ed little column if you wanted to, and like a 500-word thing. And most of the people would write about their cat or whatever. And I wrote what I thought was humor. Wrote a couple of those. And so technically, I guess I was getting paid to do that. What I do remember is I wrote maybe 3 or 4 of them, and then the editor said, they used to be funnier. Which is actually something I've heard for the whole rest of my life. Like, whatever phase I am in my life, somebody will come up to me and say, used to be funnier, Dave.
Is that how your career started? Like, what are the real roots of how this became a career for you?
Well, when I was in high school, I wrote humor pieces for my high school newspaper, like 1 or 2, because we only came out 1 or 2 times a year. And in college, I wrote what I thought were funny things for the Haverford College newspaper. And years later, I went back for a reunion, and somebody had gotten my columns from the newspaper when we were students and blown them up and put them all around the wall of the gym. And I went around reading them, and I didn't get any of the jokes. And that's because I was smoking a tremendous amount of marijuana, I think, back then when I wrote these columns.
They didn't hold up.
I didn't get any of the jokes. But then, when I really started doing it was at the Daily Local News, these ad libs when I would write every week. And when I left the paper, I kept writing them. So that's really how I always wanted to write humor. I just never thought you could make a living doing it. I always thought I would have to do something else.
I wondered when I started if it was somehow awkward praise for me to tell you that your novel sounded Hyacinth-ish, excuse me.
Esque.
Yes, either one, ish or esque, both of them. Yeah. That obviously, as a work of fiction, he's extraordinary. You grew up here in South Florida. It was the golden age of an unbelievable amount of talent that we had at our newspaper. And I just realized, though, that comparing you to him because he was first might not be the best way to compliment you, even though I mean it as the highest of compliments.
I know, I am honored. I often get confused for Carl. People will tell me how much they love my book, and then it'll turn out that it's actually Carl's.
Okay, yeah.
So
do you go with it? What do you do? Do you
just say, no, you're thinking of Carl Hyacinth, and then they always go, no, I love you too. And but anyway. But no, Carl's my very good friend, has been for many years, and I'm honored to be in any way mentioned in the same sentence as Carl. He's brilliant. The guy's brilliant.
As are you, though. But what do you feel about the writing of novels? Like, what are the things that move you professionally now to spend your time doing something as difficult as writing? You don't have to do it, right?
I do kind of, though. I mean, I really don't. I don't want to retire. My wife's an active sports writer. I'm not going to sit around the house. So I am still sitting around the house, but I'm writing while I'm sitting around the house. I don't know. Writing you don't have to retire from writing because it's not hard. I mean, it's not physically hard. So I like it. I like writing novels. I like writing others. I mean, I just finished a memoir, which is very much like this interview. In a way. Like many of the things we've discussed, I talk about it in this memoir. But I can't stop writing. I like to do it.
Let me ask you this question because I have not been able to summon either the strength or the bandwidth to tackle what would be the loneliness of a project like writing a book or a memoir. When you decided to tackle your life as a memoir, who are you doing that for? Why are you doing that?
That's a really good question, and I don't have a really good answer. I'm doing it because I discussed it at length with my agent and my editor, 2 women who I really trust and respect, and they both said, you should write a memoir. And my big concern was, and this is not false modesty, it's like, who's going to care about my, who is going to care about?
Your deep feelings are things that decades worth of listeners will care about. Your deepest feelings of a life well lived, written well, a lifetime of readers will care. What do you mean? Who's going to care?
I appreciate that. I hope you're right. I just it goes back to what we were saying about my parents from the Midwest. You just don't toot your own horn.
Well, but we were taught by journalism, don't make it I, don't make it first person, but you were breaking some of those rules in everything that you were doing.
But it was always like a humorous persona doing that. This is like pretty serious parts of it. I mean, I talk at length about my humor career and the things my readers got me to do. It looked like going to Orlando and that sort of thing.
Dave, you have
but
a
the
thousand
early
of
stuff,
those.
like where I was born and raised and how I went to school. I just still to this. I mean, the book hasn't come out yet, but I am worried about that.
Well, they can edit out the boring stuff.
It's too late. It's too late.
You've lived an interesting life, and the reason I would be interested in reading a memoir of yours is at least in part because I would be curious how it is that you are about finding joy now, what it is you've learned combined with mortality, just in general, a life lived, written now 50 years you've been writing, right?
Yeah,
50 years you've been writing?
Yeah.
That's 50 years of connection with readers.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, the one, okay, this I'm name dropping here, but Steve Martin is a friend of mine.
I know that about you. Hold on just a second. The soundboard doesn't work because the producer of the show, Matthew Kugler, is pretty incompetent.
Look at me,
I'm sorry. Yes, you're friends with Steve Martin.
Yeah, so I sent him the memoir to get a blurb because that's what you do, and usually it's like pro forma. They write a blurb. Like Steve wrote a blurb in one of my books by saying, "I love it. I haven't read it, but I." It's like, and he wasn't kidding. He hadn't read it, but
he's written a few of those. He's been asked to write a few of those.
He knows about blurb. So anyway, but in this case, he wrote me an email and said, "I'm really liking this. Can I call you?" And I go, "Yeah." And he called me up and said, "I just want you to know I really like your memoir, and I'll tell you why I like it. Because you talk about how it works, how the humor works, and how, he said, and people really like to know stuff like that, like how." So that gave me a lot of hope. If he liked it, then maybe other people will like it. But
Steve Martin, not unlike you, by the way, gives off from afar something of like, boy, that person's figured out how to be happy in life. That person has figured out some of the things that really matter so that they're not as affected by some of the superficialities as they might be.
That guy, he's amazing to me. He like is, wildly successful still. He has a hit TV show now. And he's older than I am. Not many people are older than I am. And he was by far the most successful stand-up comedian who ever lived. He was the first guy to ever do stadiums and stuff like that. And he threw it away. Nope.
It's an amazing story.
Go make movies.
He decided he didn't want to do the most successful stand-up career any of us had ever seen.
In his 30s, he just stopped and he said, "I'm going to make movies now." Successful at movies, collects art, very successful, writes books. Anyway, so yeah, he's an amazing guy. And you're right. I don't know him intimately. We're friends.
Well, you've written for him, haven't you?
I have.
Didn't you? You wrote for the Oscars for him, right?
Yeah, which was really interesting. That was I was terrified, because I hadn't met him at that point. He and I had corresponded for years, but I'd never met him. And I was quite surprised when he asked me to come. This is in 2003. When he was hosting the Oscars, and he asked me to come write jokes for him. And I had never written jokes for anybody but me. I sit in a room and my name goes on it. And so I got out there, and we're in this hotel room, conference room, and every single person besides Steve Martin and all the other people with Steve were all professional joke writers. The guys who wrote for Bruce Valanche was one of them, and John Max, who's...
This is what they do for a living. They write for him and others like this.
They only write for others.
You're the only one in the room who's an outsider?
Yes. Only one who's didn't live in L.A.
Selected by you just because he thinks you're funny and he's read your newspaper column?
Yes. Yeah, because he likes my writing. Always, he's... So I thought that the way it worked was you had to have that everybody's going to be hilarious. And they are. They're very sharp, very funny people. But I thought it was like immediately as you sit down, you say a joke and everybody goes, "Wow," and writes it down. And not at all what happens. There's a little of that at the beginning because people have some stuff prepared, but it very quickly devolves into, what about, could we do something with, and it's this real vague idea. And then somebody else will go, "Okay, well, we could do it." And then, or somebody will say something that's really stupid, but somebody will say, "Well, we could maybe," and then and tweak it and tweak it and tweak it and tweak it and tweak it. And
it sounds tedious.
It does, but it's not.
It sounds miserable.
No, it's
not as fun as I imagined.
No, it's not fun. It's not fun. It's really work. But then every now and again, somebody comes up with something, and then Steve Martin gets up and delivers his joke, and you realize 10 people wrote that joke.
Right.
You can't even really name how it started.
Did you get many of them on yourself?
I did. I mean, once I got used to the idea that I didn't have to be genius, funny guy immediately, I could just try something. Because in my world, if you try something and it's stupid, everybody's going to say, that's stupid. Like,
that's right.
In the newspaper
you get one shot at it.
Like, the editor will go, that sucks. What's wrong?
Yes.
But out there, it's like much more supportive, and they call it being good in the room. He's really good in the room. That's to say, you may never have heard of him, but he has a good sense of humor. He has a good memory for joke, so.
Where are the places that you've arrived that you look at as sort of the landmarks of how the hell did I get here doing this? Like, because I imagine that would be one of them, but you were a regular guest on the late night circuit. So
for a while, yeah.
You had a TV show after you, right?
Yeah,
for how many years did the TV show in your name last? Just called Dave.
Dave's World. 4 years.
Okay, forgive me for not knowing the name.
That's all right. That's right.
That's rest in peace, Harry Anderson. But
Yeah.
that 4 years about your life.
Yeah.
What are the bronze, silver, and gold medalist of like career perks where you're like, how the hell did this little thing I was doing over here become this?
I ended up on stage playing guitar with Bruce Springsteen. All my life, I wanted to be a musician. I was never any good at it. And that's what I wanted to be. I always wanted to be a rock musician. I was in rock bands in college. I've been always a very mediocre.
Still now, Rock Bottom Remainders is with Mitch Albom and Stephen King.
Stephen King's in our band. Amy Tan, Scott Turow, a lot of good authors.
Matt Groening.
Warren Zevon used to play with us back in the day. Roger McGuinn of the Byrds still does play with. But anyway,
are all of these names not going to fit in bronze, silver, and gold? Like this is such a common part of your life that the music part of it, that the rock band part of it is.
The rock to me that is to me like that was. It'd be like if you always wanted to play shortstop or something for the Yankees, or which probably you did not.
I did not. No,
what
I
did
didn't.
You always wanted?
I wanted to be good at sports, but it wasn't.
Whatever sport you wanted to be good at, if you'd been on a professional level of that sport. That's what this has been like for me, to be in this horrible band. You've heard us. You heard a kind of a mutant version of us, but
I think I've heard Hyacinth in that band too.
Yes.
Right?
Carl plays with us.
It's 10 great authors
that just cannot play music very well.
Right, not great musicians, but
because of who we are, we get to do it sometimes. Like this one time in L.A., Bruce Springsteen got on stage with us, and I gave him my guitar, so to this day I can say this guitar. Bruce Springsteen played this guitar, and we only had one song left at that point, which is called Gloria, 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 and I happened to sing that song. It's not a hard song to sing, and so there's this. I wish nobody filmed it. This is before iPhones, but when we do this song, I'm singing Gloria, and in my ears, Bruce Springsteen going, Gloria. In other words, he sang back up to me, Bruce Springsteen did. See, like
that's pretty good.
That's my gold.
That's your gold. What about silver and bronze? I thought you were going to go up the scale. You didn't do it. You just gave me the best one right out of the box.
That was it. Yeah. I mean, it's been all wonderful, but it's kind of like you get to know all these famous people now because of what you do. It
is a good amount of fun. It is something that was wildly unexpected from just wanting to be a sports writer. All I wanted to do was be able to make some money writing about the games. I didn't think there was anything else in it. I was never seeking money or anything else from it other than the doing of it.
On you there, I always felt like you always were very ambitious right from the start. Like when you did that high school sports show where you had me on as your first guest.
I'm going to get the video of that right now. I wouldn't say that I was necessarily ambitious. I was simply super Cuban exile motivated to work so that I could have the freedom of a career, right?
But you didn't just, as soon as you could move from a fairly limited, like, print audience to a much wider electronic audience. You made that move, and you always.
It was just a curiosity, though, about what growth could look like, right? Like I didn't come into newspapering thinking that aspirationally a television career would ever be possible. In fact, Mitch Albom was a guiding light in terms of like watching a television show simulcast in Detroit that was a radio show and not understanding how it is that any of that existed for him in Detroit. I was fascinated by the sports reporters, by how do I get into some of these places that these other journalists have gotten into so that I can expand whatever my career is outside of just Miami. Because as much interesting stuff as there can be in Miami, it can also be very limiting. It's not something that feels of the rest of the world. It seems like it takes longer to discover things in Miami. In fact, the newspaper age that we were growing up with, we had to be great and greater than the Washington Post and the New York Times for 10 years for people to recognize us as great as those places.
Yeah, we were always second tier, third tier.
But not in the work. The work was just as good. Like
I agree.
I simply will not have anyone tell me that the Washington Post or the New York Times was doing anything better than what you guys were doing in the 90s.
I agree with
we
that.
had one of the best newspaper staffs ever assembled.
I agree with all that.
It can't be disagreed with, I don't think.
No, and I don't know that people even today realize how lucky we all were. I mean, I guess those of us who were there know. But the people, do you think Miami ever really appreciated the Miami
No,
Herald?
most of the people didn't read the English that were reading the newspaper.
They thought we were communists.
No, we were writing. We were writing for Cubans from Miami who thought that you were a communist.
Yeah, true.
The memoir, though, can you take me through the going through the process of going through the pages of your life as a writer?
It was interesting. I mean, I had to go back and dig up all these old photos and letters and stuff like that, and trying to be accurate, and write to people who were there and say, "This is the way you remember this happening." Like, when you were the editor of my high school newspaper, do you remember that I wrote a column for you about like that kind of stuff?
That's cool. It's a cool rummaging, though. No,
it was. I enjoyed it, but there was always this feeling of, like I was saying earlier, it's like, who's gonna, besides me, is gonna care about this stuff? Well, we'll find out, Dan, won't we?
What about your legacy, Dave? Like you've got a legacy in this market, and you're leaving one with a memoir that details your life.
That's my legacy.
You do have
No, I do.
I don't want to take it too seriously because you're always self-deprecating, but your legacy, like how do you imagine you're going to be remembered? And I ask this question as someone who understands that Conan O'Brien will stand over the grave of Calvin Coolidge and be like, when was the last time anyone talked about Calvin Coolidge? Like we're all dust here. There's not much of a legacy, but we don't have to be that nihilistic about it.
I have thought about it, and I think that based on the humorists that I loved when I was a kid, there was a guy named Robert Benchley I was obsessed with when I was a kid. My dad had all his books. He was a very popular humorist in the 20s, 30s, 40s. He wrote for The New Yorker and Life. And he's a brilliant, brilliant guy and silly. That's what I loved about him. He was a very silly humorist, but brilliant, really smart. And I patterned myself after him more than anybody else. Now, nobody but me knows who Robert Benchley is.
But you're the one referenced in his place, though.
I understand. But that's my point is exactly that. I think that, and this is not, again, it is not false modesty. It's just the way the world works. What is funny to one generation is less and less funny because the references become vaguer and less familiar. And with humor, that's the case. So I think that my main legacy is going to be that I popularized, I didn't think of it, I didn't invent it, but I popularized International Talk Like a Pirate Day, which is observed every September 19th. Because I wrote a column once because two guys said, hey, we should all talk like pirates on September 19th. I said, that's funny, I'll do that. And it's still going on.
Chum bucket.
Yeah, that's very good. Like 50 years from now, they'll still be doing that, but I don't think they'll know who I was.
Let's go ahead and play this video that he wants to play here. You want to do the play-by-play here? This is the Miami Herald High School Sports Show. You say this is a very ambitious Dan Lebitard.
This was a young and sweaty, very sweaty.
And I'm going to face an Olympic softball pitcher.
Look how much sweat.
Look how good I feel about myself, though.
Yeah,
here.
and this woman is going to throw the ball very hard.
Claire Sua. She sets me up with a fastball first.
Nice, good, but you take a good cut. You got it Thank God we're not showing my ad back, which is mostly me backing away.
Yeah,
Here we go. Watch this closely.
She changes speed.
Hey, whoa!
That is comedically perfect there. Oh, wow, a snort from you. And as I recall, when I was sitting on the floor, I also got a snort.
Yeah.
That snort echoes 25 years because I was going to show those girls what's what, and there it is right there. She threw me a change-up. And the most embarrassing thing that can happen is me stumbling down the entirety of the third base line.
And I do point out to the other team. There you go. You were not going to leave till you hit the ball.
Well, but she threw about 70 more past me after that. I am very sweaty here, and yeah, there it is. It all goes to shit there. That's about enough. Can we
That
just
was the
end
young. Who knew where this man was going to go from there?
Dave, it's lovely seeing you. It is always lovely seeing you. I'm sorry that we got you all emotional off the top instead of just doing the fun stuff, the lighthearted stuff, the superficial stuff you wanted to do.
No. I enjoyed it, and I knew you were going to do that anyway because you always do.
I do. Love you, buddy.
Love you too, man.
The big game happened. Football's done, and man, what a time football was. I enjoyed every football week this season. Opening up a Miller Lite, that sound of the can opening, the cheers with my dad. It's football and Miller Lite. Nothing says football like the great taste of Miller Lite. Great tasting light beer for people who love beer. It's always the perfect time for friends, family, and a great tasting light beer. Tastes like Miller time. Miller Lite is brewed for taste. It hits different than other light beers. It's a taste you can depend on, folks. No games, no gimmicks, just a great beer for people who like beer. Simple ingredients, malted barley for rich, balanced toffee note flavors, that iconic golden color, the original light beer since 1975, and still the best one. Miller Lite, great taste, 96 calories. Go to MillerLite.com/beach to find delivery options near you, or you can pick up some Miller Lite pretty much anywhere they sell beer. Tastes like Miller time. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces.